Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, and I'm very glad to have with me this afternoon, be airing again on Saturday at 12 o'clock on WFOV 92.1. I'm very glad to have Henry Hatter, one of my favorite persons here in Genesee County. And when I can have Henry as a guest, I feel like I've been specially blessed. Henry, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you, George. And let me welcome you back to the United States of America.
Yeah.
You've been gone for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, I just got back from
went to the
South
mother
Africa.
country.
Yeah. And I've been there before, but I went to South Africa this time on my own. And I was able to go and explore the country a little bit more, because when you go there as part of what was in 2007, a seminar, all you see is what the bureaucrats want you to see. This time I was in Durban, South Africa, and I was able to get a car and drive around the country. So I saw it for myself, and I saw the highlights and some of the low spots in the country. It's a beautiful country, though.
Now that you've gone there, George, what would you say is important? Why should we as Americans be interested in what you have to say?
Well, I think that we have to understand some of the roots that we have in this country, and you don't want to have the roots take the place of where you are now. You know, identity, Henry, is two things. It is not just historic origin; it's also social location.
Sure.
So we always talk about where we came from. That's very important. We know that, but it's also where are you now, and we are here now. And so I understand that part of the ancestral roots, but we have roots here too.
Yes.
And I do not want to forego the roots we have here. This is where we're going to be. We're not going to South Africa.
You and I are on the same page.
We're not going back there, Henry. And we might as well. I went to a church program yesterday, and they had, dashik is on, and Henry, they got this movie. Have you seen this movie called The Black Panther?
I've seen the previews. Yes, I have.
They're wearing dashikis in the movie. That's a fictional account.
Yeah. And
we have got to get real here. We are going to be in America. I do not dislike anyone being inspired by the fictional accounts of our heritage, or even our heritage as far as what we were doing before we came here. But we're here now, and we have got to lock into the fact that this is where our people are going to be, and we've got to make the most of it. And so I was in South Africa, but I was there on a tour, and it was a learning experience as well. I went there to learn some things about what's happening in South Africa. But I came back to the country of my birth, and I'm here, and I am very proud to be a part of America. And I'll tell you this, Henry, when you're outside this country, you appreciate America a lot more. The American name means something outside the country. Yes. And I found it out. I'm glad you came to the studio for another reason today, and that is when I was in South Africa, the news broke about what happened in Florida with the shootout.
Sure.
And so it is fortuitous that you're here. I know you can't talk about all of the inside things, but on the front page of the Flint Journal yesterday,
sure,
they had this article, Clio Schools exploring armed staff for safety. And when the news broke out, when the news came across the airways about the shooting in Florida, I was in South Africa, and the question they asked was, why can't the most powerful country in the world stop the killing of its children? And it was just a major news story that was all over the airways, all over the newspapers, and they can't figure out why we can't stop these shootings at these schools. And I think we've had 17 shootings. Is it 17 shootings?
At least that much. And there are many that are just minor and threats that don't get reported.
What do you think has happened to us, Henry? One guy was saying on Mark Levine's program last night that the guns haven't changed. No. You know, the guns are inanimate objects that's sitting around, and you can put them down here, and nothing will happen if you don't pick the gun up and use it. So they were making the case that something is happening in our culture.
Yes, yeah, and I hope this does not offend you, but I'm an NRA person. I
offend you? I want to shake your hand.
I contribute to the NRA, but I don't have any guns.
Yeah.
But I want other people to have them. But I want them to use them judiciously. Guns are for policemen. The police department that's out there that's supposed to defend me. And yet my house has been shot at by kids or by Klansmen, and I've never been hurt. My kids have never been hurt. I think that they might have been afraid at one time, but that passed. And we never intend to move, and we never will move. We will die right there. That's our place. And you ask me, well, what do you think's going on in the culture? And I believe, George, that when I was a child, and you and many of us out in the audience, we remember when we had restraints. There were certain things that we couldn't do. Like if your mom asked you, did you break the window 2 doors down from your house? You had to come up with it, yes or no.
Right.
or your dad, or your uncle, or the neighbor, or somebody like that. They kept restraints on it. In a country with a constitution like ours that protects our interest, it's unfortunate that putting emphasis on the I instead of the we or us or so on and so forth has damaged the country in a way so that it cannot put together the finer points that make the country what it is. And we're a nation of laws, and yet people think, well, if you break the law, I can break the law too. So we have to have a good public policy that protects people individually and holds them accountable. And I really don't think that not even our kids are held accountable. And then when you see what's going on in Washington, D.C., we can't get along with each other, we can't work together and stuff like that. That gives kids the inspiration to act out the very same thing. And kids, by their nature at those ages, are daredevils, and they are authoritative in their own rights. And we have to yield to them because they're going to be the next generation of people who will lead this country. For example, we've lost grounds on same-sex marriage. That has gone by the wayside. We've lost ground on the marijuana situation. That will become a national respected activity in the years to come. And when we as older people have now been very much against that, we have to yield. Something's happened here. And we have to think this through. It'll take a long time to put all the components together to find out where we are and to correct the problem if we ever can.
You said that you are, you are a member of the NRA but don't have any guns.
No.
So some would see there as a disconnect. Why would you be a member of the NRA and don't own any guns?
I like the magazine. I like some of the stories, the outdoor stories that they tell. They not only tell about guns, but they tell people who hunt and have outdoor adventures and stuff like that, or some unrelated ventures to using guns as a weapon of mass destruction or as a weapon for defense.
I know you are a strong advocate of the Second Amendment.
Yes.
And I see the Second Amendment as a way of prohibiting the abuse of power. The federal government, the fear of the founders was that the government could become overpowering.
Sure.
If the people didn't have the means to defend themselves. And what I notice is every time we have one of these shootings, we don't want to see anyone getting hurt by the use of guns. But every time there's a display of guns by some maniac, we forget the person behind the gun, and we want to start talking about confiscation of the guns, and to make everything into a gun issue rather than maybe a mental health issue. This person was very much, in a mentally bad place.
I have an issue with labeling people mentally ill.
Okay.
Now, there's one thing that you don't do in a school population, K through 12 population. You don't call kids mentally ill. You don't call them uneducated, and you don't call them poor. They will fight you to death. And if you have a job, you may get fired for it, because kids have those kind of protections. And besides, the school campus is a territory that belongs only to kids. Kids have special protections when they're on the school campus. It's a haven to protect the kids. And the first line of responsibility for teachers is to protect the kids' safety. And secondly, to educate them. People don't care about the education if their kids are unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard a lot, just when I monopolized our conversation there, but I heard a lot about what was going on in Florida, what the police chief said that he was doing. Next time a kid comes in, we'll be ready for him. We'll just take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you will take care of that like poop.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to storm the campus of a K through 12 system with policemen. And you're not going to storm the school district with a militia or armed guards or anything. I hear all of this stupid stuff that we're talking about, how to correct the problem and endanger the people that we're supposed to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Arming teachers with guns. That is that's the greatest corporate violation of student rights. You remember, you can't give kids corporate penalties, like you can't touch them and stuff like that. Well, to put a gun in somebody's face and say, I'm going to kill him, a child. No, there's something wrong with that, George. We've lost our way.
We've lost our way. I would say that this gentleman, this person that did that shooting in that school, no one was surprised that it was this person that did the shooting. And in fact, there were a lot of persons that had reported to the authorities that he might well go off, and nothing was done about it. I understand they contacted not only the police department, but also the FBI.
But you cannot touch a kid if he's done nothing. If he might have, the laws have to be rewritten, we have to have new regulations. But kids are protected under the laws the way they exist. Congress has to write new laws as a state, and security agencies and stuff like that. They have to write new laws to fit the times. But right now, those kids are protected by law. You can't just go in and, like the person that said that we had a policeman out there, but he was afraid to go in. The policeman used good sense for once in his life. He didn't go in and began shooting at kids and hitting them by collateral damage means. You can't do that. Life is important and sacred to kids, and they're sacred to their parents. You have to know what you're doing. And I know that parents, if they thought about it, they wouldn't want someone to go in with an AK-15 or whatever the model of gun that they were using to kill kids through collateral damage.
You think that the officers acted appropriately by not going
Yes, I did.
in the building?
You don't storm the building.
Mm-hmm.
You have to move in a way that protects the life of the most kids.
So not going in, you think, was the right thing to do? They said they had 4 officers on the scene.
Yeah, you have to have a plan. You have to judiciously think about that, what you're going to do. You have to know what the circumstances are. And George, when I'm at school, and that's at any school in the area, in the ISD here, when I go in, I never think about kids coming in to shoot me down. I never think about it. Mm-hmm. When I'm at Clio, never think about it. Whether I'm there for an official meeting or just passing through the building, I never think about those things. Can you imagine how worrisome it is for a teacher to have a gun, thinking all day that somebody's aiming to storm that door, come in and kill me? I don't think that teachers think that way. Mm-hmm. Not in Clio, they don't.
I can't see why they don't the members of the Congress, what they do, they stop them at the door, and they have these metal detectors so that they're protected from the entry of the buildings. The federal buildings are very, very secure, and they're doing the same thing on the state level. You see those, you walk inside of a state building or county building, you're going to walk into a armed camp, at least at the front of the building. Inside the doorway and in the halls and all that, you're not really so restricted, but you are restricted at the door. So, would you say then the problem is at the doorway of the schools and the
How this guy got in there with the gun, I don't know. But I doubt whether he could get into Clio that way. And besides, Clio's been through these many, many times. We go back to 2000. I was president of the board at that time, and we've had many experiences with it. And somehow have a cool head toward that. And not all kids are bad and tend to hurt other kids, but there are kids that are random in the population, and you don't know who those kids are. And unless you have had a study or some data on the kids, everything you must do must be data driven. You got to back it up with something. You just can't go in like John Wayne or some of the people who are murderers on TV and go in and start shooting and jerking kids around.
Yeah,
I'm against that.
Yeah, you'll give it another side. I think you're the first one, Henry, that I've heard discussing this that it's giving the other side of it in terms of what carnage could have been created by going in as an officer.
Yeah.
As they're saying the officer should have done. There is that other side to it. I do notice the criticism is that obviously somebody's in that building shooting children, and the discussion has been they should have gone in there to try to end that carnage as soon as possible.
Yeah.
They say stayed outside 4 minutes with the shooting itself going on for 6 minutes. So 2 minutes of that was going on, and they say 4 minutes could have been stopped if they'd act more what they call.
If they knew where the guy was, if they knew where he was. Now you're going to scare a lot of kids when you start walking down the hallway, and you're going to create a lot of confusion. If you were the police, they could accept the policeman, but most teachers, they go into lockdown, and there are procedures that protect the kids. There are absolutely no noise, and to get behind barriers, and no loud talking, no whispering. Kids like to do that during these drills. But there are some rigorous tests that are being done, and we don't have to really overreact to this. If there's an active shooter, you don't want to put kids in harm's way just to kill someone because you think that that person is going to kill your child. Not all people go in to kill children. And some of these mass shootings, they go in for specific targets.
Yeah, I think we've come to a very bad place when you send your children to school and you have to worry about whether or not they're going to be safe, whether your children are going to come back home when the school day is over. And those are things we never had to think about back in the day when I was in school, and I'm sure when you were in school, Henry. And it's something that's happened in our culture.
Yeah.
That has shaken. It's like a web. Something has shaken the web of our culture that has cemented our relationships, because we never thought about. When I was going to school, my fear was not having my homework.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had to worry about what the responsibilities were as a student. I didn't have to worry about so much the safety issue. And I don't even have to guess about it. We didn't have anybody walking across the campus armed. And my elementary school was one which was right there situated in the middle of the community. And you could walk through the school grounds because there's no barrier, but nobody ever came across the school grounds during the school day. When they took the shortcut from the corner to another part of the street on the other side, they wouldn't come across the campus during the time school was in session. But when school was out of session, they of course take the shortcut. But the school grounds was so sacred in the community that they would go around it because of what the children being educated. And that's no longer the way we see these places that are sacrosanct. Well, our children are being educated. That's sacrosanct because it's what you said earlier. It's the future being brought forward.
Yeah, kids are a protected entity in schools, and we need to make sure we maintain that. Above all, kids. That's a haven where kids are protected.
Would you have? What is your view then of this being seen as a gun issue? You know, it's saying that we have to do something to restrict gun access to guns. So what is your position about that?
Well, I do think that access to guns kind of exacerbate the situation if they're easily accessible to kids who have in their minds to do harm to people in the community. I think, but guns themselves don't bother people. Mm-hmm. But it is, and we see that in our own neighborhoods, where guns are a threat to the community. But I don't see, that's only under certain circumstances, the people who have guns. People who go in and buy guns, particularly in small communities like ours, and have them on their person, they intend to use them. Mm-hmm. Particularly they're in a certain age group. And we've seen that over and over in young people who have guns and they do use them. We used to have, there was one year we had 66 murders in Flint due to gun violence. And most of them were in Flint. But I think that number's been reduced. And then people have asked us, well, why does Flint have such a great number of gun violence victims? Well, we don't like to talk about that in open space because other people would hear it. Mm-hmm. But it's our responsibility. It's not the man's responsibility. It's not the people in Clio. It's not God's responsibility. It is our responsibility.
I'd like to see some statistics that would show if there's any correlation between the increased violence that we have in these inner cities and the breakdown of the family unit.
Well, I think that people don't want to accept responsibility for their actions. And many of us look at our kids, our community, our living space as protected and places of nobility. Mm-hmm. Our people are better than everybody else's. Our race is better than everybody else. Mm-hmm. We are noble for what we do or how we are. But and I think that's a lot that's wrong with the United States. They cannot accept the fact that they're young white men that are violent, and they're not necessarily mentally ill. Mm-hmm. But yet, when we look at black kids, they are creeps and culprits and murderers. But we have to look at, and we don't always call them mentally ill. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's certainly some element of it. I look at this Ted Cruz guy, and then looked at Dylan Root, that guy that did the shooting down there in South Carolina. I looked at his eyes and his whole persona. Something was going on there that you don't see in what I would call him here. I'm not making a psychological evaluation as such. I'm not trained to do that, but I'm saying that something was different about Dylan Root. And I could look at him and see some derangement, some demonic type of thing was going on with him. It's just not normal to go into a church where Pearson treated you fairly, as it was in this case, and they're sitting down and taking time with him. He's a guest at the church. They didn't know who he was, and they opened their arms up to him, and the guy gets up and starts shooting. That's something going on there.
Do you remember about several months ago, there was a person that went into a church, maybe it was a year ago, and killed a lot of people in South Carolina?
Yes, I do.
It was in a church?
Yes.
They didn't label him mentally ill.
Somebody dropped the ball in my case, as far as I'm concerned.
Huh?
You mean when they went in?
Yeah, they didn't label that guy mentally ill.
I'm talking about Dylan Root.
Yeah, but this guy in Florida, you say.
Florida, yeah.
Yeah, you can probably, there's enough about the background of what people have observed about him, his school records, his grades, his attendance, and stuff like that. Those are clues to erratic behavior in students. Mm-hmm. But I don't know whether it applies across the board to all students in all circumstances, all conditions. But I do know is some of the elements that I've looked at as causes for expulsion.
Yeah, it's a very delicate and difficult situation because you were making a great point earlier about the issue of the civil liberties of the children, and you have to respect their right not to be what amounts to harassment. If they're innocent of anything and they haven't done anything, then what are you doing in terms of...
You're reinforcing their resistance.
Yes. Let me take a break at this point with WFOV, and they'll be back in 4 minutes. We want to thank John for coming in and reminding us of the fact that they take a break at this point. So we're going to pause, and we'll see you in 4 minutes. Okay, and now that they're taking their hiatus from the program, we'll continue what we're doing here. They'll join us in about a 4-minute pause. Henry, you're making some good points. It's a very delicate thing here. We've got to respect the rights. At the same time, we cannot have our children going to school and not coming home. So we've got to fix it, and how we do that, we got to do it out of respect for the Constitution and the rights of the students, and we got to also err on the side of caution so that our children are going into a safe zone.
Yes.
All our schools are safety zones.
That's our first responsibility, to protect kids. Do whatever, and we can spend, as a member of the governance part of a school district, we don't owe our loyalty to the public first. We owe our loyalty to the students first.
To the students.
We owe our loyalty to the students first, because, and that means that if kids are in an unsafe condition, the Board of Education and the superintendent has to find a way to assure that kids are safe. And in most situations, there's a compound entry into every school in this county. First of all, you got to go through 2 locked doors. Okay, the first one you acknowledge, and someone can see you with the camera. Mm-hmm. They can see what you're wearing, whether you're carrying any unusual baggage, and then they let you in that, and then they can observe you again. Now you're in a trapped space, and they will let you in after they open the door.
Yes.
That's and that's pretty secure. How the guy got in Florida with an AK-47 or whatever it was, a gun, I don't know.
It must have been. It's not going to happen here. I think that was I think it was
exclusive school.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it
can happen anywhere. And,
well, see, they didn't have an incident rate that warranted that.
Yeah, we've got to all be on guard, and we've got to be proactive. We can't wait until an incident of that magnitude occurs, and then we try and respond to it so it doesn't happen again. It should never happen. There should be no parents sending their children to school and their children do not come back home after school day is over. That's unconscionable. And I was saying earlier that when I was in South Africa at the time the story broke, and it was very big in the news. It was saying, how in the world can this country have all this carnage? Because they don't have. One thing I noticed in South Africa, and I was in some of the places where it's not in the picture books about the country. You see all the great things that the country stands for. I went into the areas which are not doing as well, and they're not having that kind of thing there. And they were saying, how is it that this is happening so often in this country? So we got to fix this problem. And I don't want to hear of any more. I was educated for 39 years, and I don't want to hear of any more children getting killed in a classroom, in a school building. Yeah, that's just it should never happen. And if school districts cannot find the money to do it, it's up to the legislature to find that money. And the people to buy that money to protect the kids. That's priority.
And then we have to do that. We have to make the legislature aware of it and the people aware of it, so that we can protect our kids at all costs, no matter what it costs.
Yes. Let me welcome back 92.1 WFOV. I want to thank you for coming back to the program, and we're very glad to have you as our listening partners on Saturday. Henry, a lot of this has been politicized, as you know. Everything's about grab the guns and blame somebody for the carnage that occurred. And I was surprised of how they were able to extrapolate a situation in Florida, which is more or less of a local or state event, onto the presidency of Donald Trump. And they're saying that some people are making the case that his NRA advocacy and the fact they are supporting they are supportive of this president. They're saying that if he had not been so loose in terms of his support, not loose in support, but just the fact he supports the NRA, that might have been some deterrent in terms of this access that we have now to guns. So, do you think that now they're talking about making it so at 21 years of age you can't get a gun until you're 21. So
have we lost our mind?
We lost our minds.
We send young men into the military at 17.
Okay. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like we expect them. Well, it's okay if they go kill somebody in another country, and we pay them for doing that, and we have to pay the shipping costs and their maintenance over there. But no, you can't have a gun until you're 21.
It gets even crazier than that in terms of how you disarm the soldiers on military bases. I don't understand that one at all.
Well, we're not thinking right, and somehow we are all uptight over incidents that probably involved because we don't like the president. That is all tied into it. And the president is preoccupied with a lot of things around the world, but I don't know whether you can lay the blame on him, because that's a fundamental right under the Constitution to own and possess and use firearms.
I think all three of us, John and the other technicians, I think we're all on the same page here. We're strong advocates of the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see anything that's encroaching on the liberties that are guaranteed. These are freedoms that are guaranteed to the American people under the Constitution.
Because once you remove that, let's face it, the First Amendment's already on. The First Amendment does not exist. The only reason why it hasn't been, it hasn't been really addressed is because the government, everybody's so complacent about their life, they don't care. But the Second Amendment is like let's face it, it's a fallback position. You got to have that, because if you don't, the government will. It's been demonstrated time and time again in countries all over the world. The governments are the only ones who have the guns. They'll use them on the civilian populace, just for whims, just on anything on a whim. So anybody who says otherwise is not looking at history.
Yes, we when I was in Nigeria, the elders sit outside the building and they're out there meeting while the children are in school. So they have a safety net. Where was I? Was I in Lagos, or was I was in Owerri, a little smaller town than Lagos. But they would be out there on the school grounds. They understand the carnage is possible, not that it's going to happen with the regularity we see in the West, because the liberties are different. But I did notice that they would be over there pretty much as an occupying force for good in those places. But the children, wherever the children are, we have got to make sure there's a safety net. So when they go to those classes, they are, first of all, well cared for as far as the breakfast and all of that. The schools are doing some of that in terms of children have to be, first of all, nourished, and then you go to the classroom, you don't have to worry about the nutritional aspect. You're not going to go and study your math, your science, your history, your English. But the safety now has become a concern, and I'm not going to take my eyes off the ball here. I want to see what they're going to do after all the partisan politics are played. What are they going to do on the other side of these discussion points to fix this problem? Because we've got to have all of our children in all the schools in every part of the country safe when they go into those classrooms, and when they leave those buildings going back home, we want to make sure 100% surety of their safety. What kind of job do you think that the president can do, Henry? You were saying that you were talking about President Trump being blamed, and I was talking about it as well, being blamed for a lot of this. But what can the president do? What can happen on a national level?
The first thing, he's got to lay off of raising the age to 21.
You don't think that's the right move?
No, and then ask the same young man to go and kill somebody somewhere else.
Your guns are another.
And this is the age where they are the greatest marksmen, because they can coordinate their skills. Their body can coordinate very well. They are really good for that kind of stuff. And then we ask them to protect us, but you don't have any skills until you get to 21. Mm-hmm. And part of those you've lost because of time. Mm-hmm. But one of the things we don't want to do is to intimidate students, intimidate kids by lowering our expectations of them. They should have all of the rights and privileges that everybody else has when they become an adult. The age of adult is 18, according to school.
That's true. That's a good point.
And you don't want to go that far.
Yeah, and these
You
band-aids.
got to hold them accountable for their action. I'd say we must hold people accountable for their action. And we're going to lose. We're not always going to win. And some people will become statistics because we hold to that. But that's random throughout our population.
Let me try to use the discussion point about the gun issue in a larger sense of the president. I want to get your reading on the overall job that's being done to bring the country together by the president. Do you think he's doing a good job?
The president is doing an absolutely profound job. We are a better country today, George, than we've ever been. If you look, for example, study media, or study the people who are doing advertisement for the country, for the population. Study who's becoming CEOs. Study who is becoming rich through entertainment, whether it's basketball, football, or actors. Who are the great writers that the public receives from the media and other sources? And you will find out that those are black. Anybody who has common sense and good judgment, looking at the media day after day, see something that we've never seen before. It's a number of black people in the media. Not only blacks, but other people of color. But predominantly to us, the blacks. I think the country is being transformed. And we were told that Trump will, and the Ku Klux Klan and the skinheads and people who don't like other people of color, were going to rise up. But yet nothing's happened. They are, and this is being done not by government, but by the sentiment of the president. You know, he can move things around and not say something, not say anything about it. Because if the government had to change policies, they would damage the process. Because every elected official has a constituency. And that constituency is leaning one way or the other. So, we don't want politicians to touch this. Let the American people handle it. Because the American people are handling it. Business, the American people, the silent majority, whatever you want to call it. And yet I see all of this criticism that's going on under this dark cloud or whatever. And yet there's something bright in those clouds. You got to look for the positives, because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right?
Right.
And there's a silver lining under these things. You got to look for them. You got to look for the positives in everything that we do. And yet I see people just complain all the time.
Yes, it's
but there will come a time when we will spend too much money out of the Treasury trying to meet all of these needs for everybody who has a need. Then we'll become a poor country, and we'll probably die the same life that a dying planet will die. Lifeless.
I see that as a major problem. Everybody is beating up on the country, and it's so divisional in terms of the poisoning of the atmosphere and how that is passed down from on high down to the local level. And I think a lot of this poisoning is going on by these politicians that just on the national level can't get along on anything.
No.
Everything that one party suggests, other parties opposed to. And it's all about, getting political advantage and trying to obtain political power. And we have got to get in a more cooperative spirit in this country, because I think this is having an effect upon our culture as well, and on our children. To see us as adults fighting over everything. Everything is so divided right now.
Yes.
And
but we're getting along well in here if we just be quiet and do the things that we need to do, and not go out and antagonize other people and just push their heads in the mud and like we can do by criticizing them. I heard a story today on WJR about, and they were talking about Black history, and people were complaining. And yet all of this progress is going on right around us now. We need to see that opportunity, because this is not going to last long. This is our opportunity.
Basically about what?
About racism and stuff like that. And guys, if you go out and look for racism every day, that's what you're going to find, because there's somebody always willing to accommodate you. But if we are positive sometimes, and many white Americans want us to do well, and I can attest to that, because they tell me all the time, and some of the overheard comments that I hear, they want us to do well. They will encourage us. They will support us. Republicans want us to do well, but they want us to self-start. They want us to use our own energy. They want us to compete with people out there in the workforce or in the community and the country. You've got to compete with other people. Just because we have segments of people who are white or Indian or Chinese that do well, that's our competition. We have to teach our kids how to go out and compete with them.
Yeah, we're so divided in this country. We're divided along lines of race, and we're more divided around race now than we were when we had those signs up.
Yeah.
And blacks were sitting in the back of the bus. We were
better off.
We were actually fighting through the maze, and rather than all this blame game, we had to understand how we could move forward under the circumstance we were in, and then by the circumstance being changed, you have solved some of the problem just by your advancement.
Yes.
And this woe is me kind of stuff that we're into right now is really bothersome, and I'm troubled by this the negativity that I see in our community.
Yeah, and I think what's encouraging all of this, George, is also we have studied the impact of the paradigm shift. And I've been talking about that for at least since 1984. My wife and I, excuse me, I was on a trip for General Motors Corporation in Boston. And I stopped at a drugstore and I picked up, this was 1984. And at that time, a lot of things were going on. The book by George Orwell, 1984, that was playing out well, and people were expecting certain things to happen. We were talking about the day of Big Brother. Also, I read in the Boston Globe at that time that the Hispanics will supersede that of the Black Americans by 2005. It happened about 2003. Then it's speculated. It said women in the new century will play a much bigger role in all aspects of the country. If we can stop and just think about that for a moment, that has come to be. Women are playing a major part of the roles for governance in this country. And because of women, that they may have helped African Americans. This event happening today, where Black Americans the restraint has been lifted so that we can move a little bit. And as we think about this and people begin to write about it, we will probably come up with the revelation that all of this stuff is connected. 1984, the paradigm shift, the rise of women, and the displacement of Hispanics with African Americans with the Hispanics.
Right. What I've seen, Henry, is as the barriers have been lowered, our racial narrative has gone in the opposite direction. It seems like we're making racism out of everything that goes on, and so the racial narrative has increased in our community, and the barriers have gone down. And I think we have to look at that. I think we have to look at what are we saying to ourselves and what we're saying to our children, so that before they can get out of the box, so to speak, and before they have a chance to actually show what they can do, a lot of our discussions right now are defeating our children because with our narrative, we've got to get our narrative straight. We're not nearly under the whip that our parents were under, and yet look how much progress we made under circumstances that are no question much worse during the time when they were coming up, and when we were coming up as children as well, than what these children are coming up under now. But listen to how our dialogue is not allowing that message to get through.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I've been very critical of that too. Now we know that for hundreds of years, race has been defined as three types: the Caucasians, the Negroid, and the Chinese.
Okay.
Whatever they call. I don't recall exactly right now. It escapes me. But now they talk, when people that have dark skin, they say it's racist. Those people are part of Caucasians. Hispanics are, Arabs, Jews, and all of those people. Those are cultural distinctions, not racial. And they distinguish that. And I know what you're talking about because I've complained about that not complained, I just pointed it out. For many years, we were getting things too goofed up, and people can't navigate that. If we have to protect the integrity of people who look like us, but who are not engaged in the same thing that we are.
I think we have to also become a lot more self-critical and looking inward more than we do. We seem to be always pointing outward. All the problems have to be about somebody else's behavior. It's never about our own behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem. I was in Birmingham when Bull Connor was doing the things he was doing, and we had real problems with the city administration and all of the things that were happening in segregation in South. It was happening in Birmingham. Birmingham was called Birmingham in some ways because there had so many bombings going on. You know what our discussions were about? Go to school, get your lesson out, be the best you can be. You have to be twice as good. That's what I heard.
Yes, that's what I heard.
And we had these messages that were showing us the solution. The solution was your excellence. And we overcame all those burdens. Those persons couldn't hold us back because we didn't hold ourselves back. And I think our parents did a tremendous service at that time, not only for those communities, but for the race, because they were not victims.
And that's right. And they didn't have the resources that everybody else had, but they endured and they worked hard. They taught the kids well. They restrained them from inappropriate actions or actions that would damage them or the image of the cultural group.
I was, Henry, I was at a church yesterday. They had their Black History program, and I have to say that I was very impressed. I was at the New Zion Baptist Church, and the pastor was talking about Lawyer Shores, who was a great lawyer in Alabama, the one that was fighting to get those people like Arthur and Lucy and Vivian Malone, Robert Hood, and the University of Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
They were bombing this man's house, and he said that Lawyer Shores, they kept on attacking him and all of that, but he kept going forward. And that's the kind of people we were. We were the persons that you could not, we could not be stopped because we wouldn't stop. And when I heard the name Lawyer Shores, I was saying, wow, I haven't heard anybody mention that person's name in a long time. It was a very great Black History program, and it just reminded me of how much we have come away from those things that brought us forward. It's going to depend upon us to resolve the problems that's facing us. Nobody's going to resolve those problems for us. We've got to do it ourselves. And that's going to be a lot more introspection than what we're doing right now, because it's all this pointing at other people, what they're doing. Racism is over here, and that was racist, and things of that sort. And racism cannot be defining all these bad things we see happening, Henry, because it wasn't as bad, it's not as bad now as it was in our parents.
You know, I don't have a problem with race, and I know that there are people who maybe don't like me or maybe put barriers in front of me, maybe, but I don't see those. I have to be able to be sensitive to it, but just as an abstraction, It doesn't exist for me.
Mm-hmm. Let me tell you about something happened to me when I was on my trip to South Africa. I was, being the cheapskate I am, I went around. I didn't go directly to South Africa. I got a cheaper ticket by going around to. I went on a circuitous route to South Africa. I went to Doha, Qatar, because the ticket was $200 cheaper. I spent more hours in the airport. But when I was coming back, I hadn't shaved. I had a beard, and at the airport, because I was looking like I might have been one of those persons coming into the country to do some harm to the country. I had this beard and everything. They wanted to search me. I didn't ask the person at the airport why you're searching other people and why you want to search me and give them a fit. I had to figure out why was I being targeted. You know why I was being targeted? I had that beard. I came home and I shaved that beard off. Because when I went over there, nobody was concerned about me.
Yeah.
I was looking like some of these guys, that's wearing a beard and you don't know what they're thinking. And I understood it. The question is always to me, what am I doing to project something out there that I'm not trying to project that someone is perceiving in the wrong way? And my personal power is I can fix that at this end. I don't ever want anybody to believe they're going to stop me from doing what I intend to do, because I have personal power and I don't surrender that just because you're making an accusation about something that about me that's not true. And I never take it personally. People want to jump out the way when I'm coming down the aisles of stores. I don't take that personally. It's not anything to do with me. We got to look at why that reaction takes place and what are people afraid of. The individual is not only the only thing they're looking at. They're looking at something else that we might want to look at as far as changing the imagery that people have of us, because we're not representing like we once did. When you saw a black child when I was coming up, you knew you had a child under control, because they knew if they knew your parents, they'd go tell your parents what you were doing out there in the middle of the community, embarrassing your parents, and they knew your parents would take care of it. And we've got to look at what we lost and understand that, and we can put a lot of that. In other words, we can solve our own problems.
Yeah, Joe, I was going to ask you, and this is kind of a philosophical question, and we need to think, and I hope that your audience will also think about that. Maybe now, as we've had 240 years of practice on our Constitution, does the Constitution give us too many choices that we cannot deal with, and yet pull things together in times of crisis so that we can get along with each other? And I am so glad that you did mention the fact that we need to think about the problems of racism in this country, and everybody has to think about that, because when we talked about the paradigm shift 30 years ago, I did have a Mexican, I had a black and a white on the show, and I asked them, what do you think that we ought to be teaching our kids, respectively, in each of your groups, about how we maintain a free and democratic society after whites in this country will no longer be the arithmetic and political majority of this country? What do you think that we ought to do? And each one of them had their responses. And I tried to take that elsewhere to make a bigger audience. I took it to the party, and I asked people, what do you think we should be doing? They says, now is not the time, and don't develop it here. I took it to Clio schools, and I asked people there, and I took it to the regional planning board. Nobody would touch it. But what I've got now, Montezuma's revenge. Because what I see on TV is they've been listening all the time, because we don't have to have this apocalypse. They're letting African Americans and other people come in to the major part of society and be accepted and do things that they never thought that they would be able to do. That might have started a little bit under President Obama, but it's here and it's maintained, and government has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, we were a can-do community, I know that we were able to rely upon and also knew the persons that were next door. We could rely upon our neighbors. And when we had a shortage, we didn't turn to the government for the solution. We went next door and borrowed the flour when we had a shortage in our own household. We knew it would be available because we were a community. And I want to see us get back to that. I don't like this pointing out whatever the problems are outside. Those are the problems. The response to those problems is going to be whether or not we are advancing or not.
Yeah, I think
the response to the problem is going to be the
I think
difference. Adams
and Hamilton and Madison did discuss some of the things that we could not, even government could not do. And that is, there would be some things that, as with all of the power that government has to do, and all of the restraints and restrictions and controls, there would be certain things it wouldn't be able to do. And like, for example, because every party has a constituency. And that constituency, you got to respond to them before you respond to the general public.
Maybe that's why we were doing so much for ourselves in the South. We knew we couldn't call on Bull Connor to do anything for us, so we weren't going to call him up. But we weren't relying upon government as much as we are doing right now. And we had to turn to each other rather than turning on each other. Mm-hmm. We had enough external problems to deal with without adding to that burden by having problems inside of the group. And I think we got to start thinking about that as a way of getting back to some fundamentals in our community. John is telling us we got to wrap it up, and that Henry, I want to thank you again for coming in.
Thank you. I don't think we could go on. I'm sorry. Invite me back. We'll take this over and drive it further when we get new information.
Yeah, you gotta have me back.
Lots is being developed right now, and a lot of things are changing. We need to go back and evaluate how African Americans and other people of color are taking what we see.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you for coming in the studio again, and we will definitely have you back, Henry.
Okay.
You're one of my favorite guests. Okay, want to thank all the listeners and those who are the viewers here at allpointstv.com for staying tuned for the last hour. We will see you again next week. Don't forget to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.